Captain Jake Morrison sat in the back row of the Galactic Council chambers and watched the other species tear apart everything humans had built over 200 years. The massive hall on Nexus Prime buzzed with angry voices from 17 different worlds. Reptilian Kethmori hissed through their translator devices, while insectoid hive representatives clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The human expansion proposal is rejected, announced Zeke-Thai Vorthuk, the lead Kethmori counselor, his yellow eyes fixed on the small human delegation with obvious disgust. Furthermore, we propose new taxation on all human colony worlds. These primitive beings have taken enough resources from civilized species. Dr. Lisa Grant, the chief human diplomat, remained perfectly still in her chair. She had served in this position for 12 years and had seen the attitudes toward humanity slowly change from respect to tolerance to outright hostility. Her hands stayed folded in her lap as alien after alien stood to support the taxation proposal. Humans are barely evolved primates, declared Glixandra, speaking for the Hive Collective. Their emotional instability makes them unsuitable for galactic governance. We have tolerated their presence too long. Commander Alex Carter shifted slightly behind Jake. The security chief had been a Marine before joining the diplomatic corps, and Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. 20 armed aliens surrounded their small group of 12 humans, but Alex showed no fear. None of them did. Chairman Theron Blackwood, the elderly leader of the human delegation, sat at the front table with his back straight. At 78 years old, he had spent more time in these chambers than any other human alive. He had negotiated peace treaties, established trade routes, and helped build the infrastructure that kept 17 star systems connected and prosperous. The voting began. Species after species raised their appendages, tentacles, or claws to support the new restrictions on humanity. The Crystalline Confederation voted yes. The Aquatic Depths Alliance voted yes. Even the traditionally neutral Ethereal Collective voted to restrict human rights. The motion passes, Vorthik announced with satisfaction. Human expansion rights are revoked. Colony taxation begins immediately. Furthermore, humans will no longer hold positions on economic or military committees. Laughter echoed through the chamber. Not the pleasant sound of human amusement, but the harsh clicking, hissing, and buzzing of alien species celebrating what they saw as a victory over their former partners. Jake watched Chairman Blackwood's face. The old man showed no anger, no surprise, no emotion at all. He simply nodded once and made a note on his datapad. There is one more matter, Vorthik continued, his translator making his voice sound even more arrogant than usual. The pure galaxy. Coalition has prepared a statement regarding human participation in this council. A holographic display activated above the chamber floor. The Coalition logo appeared, showing the symbols of 8 major species united under the banner of galactic purity. Jake had been monitoring their communications for months and knew this moment would come. Humans, the recorded message began, represent everything wrong with galactic civilization. They are violent, emotional, and backward. Their so-called contributions to our society are the products of theft and imitation, not innovation. We demand their immediate removal from all council positions and the establishment of restricted zones for human activity. The message continued for several minutes, listing every perceived fault of humanity. They called humans war-loving savages and a contamination of civilized space. They accused humanity of stealing alien technology and claimed that human colonies were breeding grounds for chaos and rebellion. When the message ended, Vorthik looked directly at Chairman Blackwood. The Pure Galaxy Coalition speaks for the majority of civilized species. What response do humans offer to these charges? Chamber fell silent. Every alien eye, optical sensor, and hearing organ focused on the small human delegation. Jake could feel the weight of their attention and their obvious expectation that humans would either grovel for forgiveness or explode in anger. Chairman Blackwood stood slowly. His movements were careful and deliberate, showing none of the shaking that age might normally bring. He looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of representatives from species that had once called humanity their closest allies. The human delegation, Blackwood said in a clear, calm voice, withdraws from all Galactic Council proceedings, effective immediately. That was all. No angry speech, no threats. No demands for apologies or explanations. Just a simple statement. A fact delivered in the same tone someone might use to comment on the weather. The aliens looked confused. They had expected shouting, pleading, or at least some kind of dramatic response. Instead, they got 12 humans calmly gathering their belongings and preparing to leave. You cannot simply withdraw, Vorthik protested. There are procedures, paperwork, treaties to dissolve. Chairman Blackwood paused at the chamber entrance. All human treaty obligations will be fulfilled according to their terms. All human installations will be properly decommissioned. All human personnel will be withdrawn from joint operations within standard notification periods. But the infrastructure, Glixandra buzzed urgently, the trade routes, the maintenance contracts, will expire according to their terms, Blackwood replied. Good day. The human delegation walked out of the Galactic Council chambers for the last time. They moved with quiet dignity, their heads held high and their steps measured. Not one of them looked back. Behind them, the aliens began to realize what had just happened. For the first time in Council history, an entire species had simply walked away. No drama, no threats of war, no final ultimatum. They had just left. Jake followed his colleagues through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The space station had been designed jointly by 7 species, but humans had provided most of the engineering expertise. Human-built gravity generators kept everyone comfortable. Human-designed air recycling systems made the atmosphere breathable for all species. Human-installed computer networks managed everything from lighting to life support. As they walked, Jake noticed things he had never paid attention to before. The subtle Human Federation logos on critical system panels, the familiar design elements in the corridor architecture, the fact that most of the maintenance workers they passed were human contractors. Their transport ship waited in Docking Bay 7. The USS Harmony had served as the human diplomatic vessel for 15 years. Her captain, Maria Santos, stood at the airlock with her crew of 22 humans. Order, sir? Captain Santos asked Chairman Blackwood. Set course for Earth, the old diplomat replied, and send a priority message to all human colonies, stations, and installations. Operation Quiet Exit is now active. As the Harmony departed Nexus Prime, Jake looked back at the massive space station through a viewing port. The aliens were probably still arguing about what had just happened. They would spend days trying to understand why humans had reacted so calmly to their insults and restrictions. What they did not know was that humans had been planning for this possibility for decades. Every human installation had exit protocols. Every contract had termination clauses. Every system had human-only backup controls. The aliens thought they had won a great victory by driving humanity away. They celebrated their success in establishing the Pure Galaxy Coalition. They congratulated themselves on ridding civilized space of the human contamination. They had no idea what they had actually done. In their arrogance and prejudice, they had just removed the species that kept Galactic civilization running. The species that maintained their technology, managed their supply chains, and solved their most complex problems. The Galactic Council had made the greatest mistake in their history. They had underestimated the wrong species entirely. And soon, Very soon, they would understand the true cost of their decision. Admiral Kate Phillips stood on the bridge of the UHS Enterprise and watched her fleet prepare for the largest evacuation in human history. 6 months had passed since Chairman Blackwood walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and Operation Quiet Exit was proceeding exactly as planned. "Status report," she ordered her communications officer. "All human colonies have confirmed receipt of evacuation orders," reported Zara Thompson. "Commercial operations are shutting down on schedule. Trade agreements are being terminated per contract terms." Kate nodded. The aliens still had no idea what was coming. They were too busy celebrating their victory and arguing over how to divide the territories humans would abandon. Intelligence reports showed that the Kethmori Empire and Hive Collective were already planning expansion into former human space. On New Montana, Colonial Administrator Maya Stevens supervised the final phase of evacuation. A mining colony had been home to 50,000 humans for 30 years. Now it would be empty within a week. "Last transport leaves tomorrow," she told her assistant, Ben Walker. "All equipment not essential to basic life support has been removed or disabled." Ben looked around the control center, where he had worked for 8 years. Banks of computers that managed mining operations, atmospheric processors, and orbital defense platforms would soon go dark forever. "The Kethmori don't know what they're taking over, do they?" Maya smiled grimly. "They think they're getting a functional mining operation. What they're actually getting is a collection of buildings and some very expensive paperweights." The human evacuation was invisible to most aliens. Humans had always been quiet about their operations, and their withdrawal was equally silent. Trade shipments simply stopped arriving. Maintenance crews failed to show up for scheduled repairs. Technical support contracts expired without renewal. Dr. Sam Rodriguez, head of Human Intelligence Operations, monitored alien communications from his hidden facility on Kepler Station. The reports painted a clear picture of growing confusion among alien species. "The Crystalline Confederation is reporting supply shortages," his analyst reported. "Their industrial replicators are failing without human-provided maintenance protocols." "What about the Hive?" Sam asked. "More interesting. They're experiencing computational errors in their collective network. Apparently, they've been using human-designed quantum processors for their hive-mind communications." Sam made notes on his datapad. Every piece of information would be crucial for what came next. The aliens had spent decades integrating human technology into their societies without really understanding how it worked. They had grown dependent on human expertise while simultaneously despising the species that provided it. On the trade station Harmony Point, Coordinator Ben Walker shut down the last human commercial operation in neutral space. The station had been a hub for interspecies commerce for 40 years, handling everything from rare minerals to exotic foods. "Final inventory complete," he announced to his team. "All human goods have been removed. All contracts have been terminated. All accounts have been closed." His deputy, Linda Chong, looked at the empty storage bays. "The aliens are going to notice this, aren't they?" "Eventually," Ben replied. "But by then, it will be too late to matter." The truth was that humans handled nearly 70% of all interstellar trade logistics. They didn't own the goods or control the markets, but they managed the shipping, handled the complex paperwork, and maintained the computer systems that tracked everything. Without human oversight, the galactic economy would begin to collapse within months. Admiral Phillips received regular reports from evacuation coordinators across human space. The operation was massive in scope, but proceeding smoothly. Humans had always been good at logistics and planning. "New Texas is complete," reported Captain Danny Martinez from his evacuation ship. "All 57 colonies in the outer rim are now empty. We've disabled all infrastructure that requires human maintenance protocols. Casualties? Admiral Phillips asked. None. The aliens haven't interfered with our evacuation at all. They seem to think we're just withdrawing from contested areas. That was exactly what the aliens thought. They saw humans pulling back from border regions and assumed it was a sign of weakness. They had no idea that humans were evacuating from everywhere, including areas that had never been disputed. On the industrial world of New Birmingham, Chief Engineer Rick Stone supervised the shutdown of the massive manufacturing complex that produced computer components for 12 different species. The facility had operated continuously for 68 years and supplied critical technology throughout the galaxy. All production lines are offline, he reported to Admiral Phillips. We've removed all human-specific equipment and wiped all computer systems. The basic infrastructure remains, but without our control systems and maintenance protocols, nothing will function. The aliens who had celebrated humanity's departure from the Galactic Council were about to learn an expensive lesson. They had assumed that human technology was primitive and easily replaceable. They had no idea that human engineering was so sophisticated that it appeared simple, or that human systems were designed with security features that only humans could. Access. Dr. Rodriguez intercepted a communication between Kethmori War Prime Vexthalar and his fleet commanders. The reptilian military leader was planning to occupy the new Montana system within 2 weeks. The human cowards have abandoned valuable mining operations, Vexthalar hissed to his subordinates. We will claim these resources for the glory of Wari, the Kethmori Empire. Their primitive equipment will serve our purposes well. Sam almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Communications Officer Zara Thompson monitored news broadcasts from across alien space. The reports were increasingly confused and contradictory. Some species blamed equipment failures on sabotage. Others claimed that human technology had been deliberately designed to fail. A few were beginning to suspect that humans had been more important to galactic civilization than anyone had realized. The Aquatic Depths Alliance is reporting massive system failures in their deep-sea installations, Zara reported. Apparently, their life support systems were maintained exclusively by human engineers. Admiral Phillips nodded. Any casualties? Not yet. But they're evacuating 3 major cities as a precaution. The evacuation continued. Human families loaded their belongings onto transport ships and left homes they had built over generations. Human technicians shut down facilities they had operated for decades. Human merchants closed businesses they had developed from nothing. And through it all, the aliens celebrated. They threw parties on Nexus Prime to commemorate their victory over human aggression. They made speeches about the dawn of a new era of galactic purity. They congratulated themselves on finally putting humans in their place. Maya Stevens stood in the empty control center of New Montana and looked out at the abandoned mining complex. Massive excavators sat silent in the open pits, processing plants that had refined rare metals for 30 years were dark and cold. The orbital defense platforms that had protected the system for 3 decades were powered down and locked. Beautiful, isn't it? She said to the empty room. 30 years of human engineering, reduced to expensive scrap in a single day. She activated her personal communicator. Admiral Phillips, this is New Montana Control. Colony evacuation is complete. All systems are offline. The Kethmori can have their prize now. 2 days later, a Kethmori battle fleet arrived in the New Montana system. War Prime Vexthalar looked at the detailed scans of the mining operation and congratulated himself on an easy victory. The humans have left us everything, he told his fleet commanders. Their cowardice is our gain. Begin occupation immediately. What Vexthalar did not know was that everything the humans had left behind was about to become his worst nightmare. War Prime Vexthalar stood in what had been the control center of New Montana and tried to understand why nothing worked. 1 year had passed since the Kethmori Empire had claimed the abandoned human mining colony, and every day brought new disasters. Report, he demanded from his chief engineer. The atmospheric processors are failing again. Engineer Thekmal replied nervously. We have replaced the power cells 3 times, but the systems continue to malfunction. The human equipment appears to be more complex than our initial assessments indicated. Vexthalar hissed in frustration. When his forces had first arrived, everything had seemed functional. The buildings were intact, the machinery was present, and the basic life support systems were operating. But within days, critical systems began failing in ways that made no sense. The mining excavators would run for a few hours, and then shut down with error messages in human languages that their translators could not properly decode. The ore processing plants would start their cycles normally, but then produce useless slag instead of refined metals. Even simple things like door controls and lighting systems began malfunctioning randomly. The humans must have sabotaged everything before they left, Vexthalar concluded. Find the sabotage devices and remove them. But there were no sabotage devices. The truth was far more humbling and far more dangerous for the Kethmori Empire. Human technology was not primitive at all. It was so advanced that it appeared simple to outside observers, and it was designed with security features that only humans understood. 3 star systems away, Node Alpha 7 of the Hive Collective was discovering the same disturbing reality. The insectoid collective consciousness had claimed 17 former human installations, expecting to integrate their technology into the Hive network seamlessly. Instead, the Hive was facing a crisis that threatened their entire civilization. Analysis of human computational systems reveals unprecedented complexity. Node Alpha 7 reported to the Supreme Node. Their quantum processors utilize algorithms that our collective consciousness cannot decode. Without these processors, our hive mind network is experiencing critical failures. The Hive had not realized that their vaunted collective intelligence depended heavily on human-designed quantum computers. For 50 years, humans had quietly upgraded and maintained the hives. Computational infrastructure. The insectoids had assumed their own minds were generating the increased processing power, but the reality was that human engineers had been amplifying their natural abilities with sophisticated technology. Now, with the humans gone and their equipment failing, the Hive found their collective consciousness becoming sluggish and error-prone. Peripheral nodes were losing connection to the central network. Complex calculations that had once been simple were becoming impossible. On Earth, Dr. Nenia Clark analyzed intelligence reports from across alien space with grim satisfaction. As an expert on galactic economics and supply chains, she had predicted exactly what was happening. The cascade failures are accelerating, she reported to President Jack Cooper. 17 species are experiencing critical infrastructure problems. 8 major trade routes have collapsed completely due to navigation system failures. President Cooper reviewed the data on his screen. The aliens had thought they were getting rid of a troublesome and primitive species. Instead, they had removed the engineers, technicians, and managers who kept their civilization functioning. Casualties? He asked. Surprisingly few so far, Dr. Clark replied. Most species are managing emergency evacuations and basic life support. But their industrial capacity is dropping rapidly, and food distribution networks are beginning to fail. The humans had been careful to avoid causing mass deaths during their withdrawal. Every critical life support system had been left with enough redundancy to allow for emergency evacuations. But everything else, everything that made modern galactic civilization possible, was failing at an accelerating rate. Colonel Mike Torres monitored the situation from his command post on the human fortress world of New Geneva. His special operations Teams were positioned throughout human space, ready to assist with refugee evacuations if necessary. The Crystalline Confederation has lost 3 industrial worlds, his intelligence officer reported. Their crystal-growing technology was entirely dependent on human-maintained atmospheric processors. Without precise environmental control, their manufacturing has collapsed. Any requests for assistance? Torres asked. Several, but they're not being directed to us. They still don't understand that humans were responsible for maintaining their technology. That was the most remarkable aspect of the crisis. Even as their civilizations crumbled around them, most alien species could not accept that humans had been essential to their success. They blamed sabotage, equipment age, or simple bad luck. The idea that the primitive humans had been keeping their advanced societies running was too humiliating to acknowledge. Danny Martinez, working undercover as a maintenance worker on Nexus Prime, sent regular reports to human intelligence. The famous space station was experiencing its own cascading failures. Life support is operating at 60% efficiency, he reported. The Galactic Council has been forced to limit sessions to 4 hours due to atmospheric problems. 3. Sections of the station have been evacuated due to gravity generator failures. The irony was perfect. The Galactic Council chambers, where aliens had celebrated their victory over humanity, were now barely habitable because the human-designed systems that supported them were breaking down. High Arbitrator Quinn Telex of the Ethereal Collective was one of the first alien leaders to suspect the truth. Her species prided themselves on logic and careful analysis, and the pattern of failures was becoming impossible to ignore. Request immediate consultation with all department heads, she ordered. Her staff, I want a complete analysis of every system failure in the past year. Cross-reference the failures with species origin of the technology and maintenance protocols. The report that came back was devastating. 93% of the critical failures involved technology that had been installed, upgraded, or maintained by humans. From navigation systems that guided starships to atmospheric processors that kept colonies habitable, human fingerprints were everywhere. How is this possible? She asked her chief analyst. Humans were never considered a technologically advanced species. That appears to have been our fundamental error, the analyst replied. Human technology was so well designed that it appeared simple. Their maintenance protocols were so efficient that other species never learned to operate without human support. War Prime Vexthalar received an emergency communication from Kethmori High Command. 3 more mining colonies had been abandoned due to equipment failures, and 2 agricultural worlds were facing starvation because their automated farming systems had stopped working. The human plague spreads, declared Supreme War Leader Kethiak. Their sabotage threatens the entire empire. You will capture human technicians and force them to repair the damage they have caused. But there were no human technicians to capture. The evacuation had been complete and thorough. Every human in former Kethmori space had withdrawn to the safety of human territory months earlier. Node-Alpha-7 attempted to reverse engineer human quantum processors, but discovered that the technology was far beyond Hive understanding. The devices used principles of quantum mechanics that the collective consciousness had never encountered. Without the theoretical knowledge that underpinned the technology, the Hive could not even begin to duplicate it. We require human technical assistance, Node Alpha 7 finally admitted to the Supreme Node. Our survival depends on understanding their computational systems. The admission was crushing for a species that had considered itself intellectually superior to all others. The mighty Hive Collective, with their vaunted group intelligence, had been revealed as dependent children relying on human parents to keep their civilization running. Professor Rick Stone, now safely on the human research Station New Cambridge, reviewed reports of alien attempts to operate abandoned human equipment. The results were almost comical if they had not been so tragic. The Aquatic Depths Alliance tried to restart the atmospheric processors on New Birmingham, he told his research team. They managed to fill 3 city districts with toxic gas before. They figured out how to shut the system down. The aliens had assumed that human technology was primitive because it was reliable and easy to use. They had not realized that making complex systems appear simple required enormous sophistication in design and engineering. As the crisis deepened, some alien species began reaching out to their neighbors for technical assistance. But every species was facing the same problems. The humans had been so thoroughly integrated into galactic civilization that their absence created failures everywhere simultaneously. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to address the growing crisis. Representatives from 14 species gathered in the damaged chambers of Nexus Prime to discuss what they were beginning to call the infrastructure plague. "We need solutions," declared Councillor Vorthik, looking considerably less arrogant than he had a year earlier. "Our civilizations are failing, and we cannot determine the cause." President Jack Cooper stood in the Situation Room of the human colonial government and watched 17 different alien civilizations collapse simultaneously. 18 months had passed since the quiet withdrawal from the Galactic Council, and the cascade failures were accelerating beyond even the most pessimistic human predictions. "Status report," he requested from his cabinet. Dr. Nina Clark stepped forward with her latest analysis. "The Kethmori Empire has lost 47% of their industrial capacity. The Hive Collective is down to 38% computational efficiency. 6 species have declared states of emergency, and 3 have begun evacuating their core worlds." "Casualties?" Cooper asked. "Surprisingly low," reported General Lara Hayes. "Most species are managing emergency life support, but their food distribution networks are collapsing. We estimate that 17 million aliens across 12 worlds are facing potential starvation within the next 6 months." The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. The species that had declared humans barely evolved primates were now facing extinction because they could not operate the technology that humans had quietly built and maintained for them. On Nexus Prime, High Arbitrator Quintelix called an emergency meeting of the remaining functional alien leaders. The famous space station was now operating on backup power, and entire sections had been sealed off due to life support failures. "We must face the truth," she announced to the assembled representatives. "The infrastructure failures are not random. They are not the result of sabotage or equipment age. They are the direct result of human withdrawal from galactic society." The chamber erupted in angry protests. Councillor Vorthik, leader of the Pure Galaxy Coalition, stood with his usual arrogance, despite the failing life support systems around him. "Impossible," he declared. "Humans are primitive. Their technology is basic. These failures must have another cause." Quintelix activated a holographic display showing failure patterns across 17 star systems. 96% of critical system failures involve technology that was installed, maintained, or upgraded by humans. The correlation is mathematically impossible to ignore. Ambassador Glixandra, speaking for the weakened Hive Collective, buzzed uncertainly. "If this analysis is correct, then humans were not the junior partners we believed them to be." "They were not partners at all?" Quintelix replied grimly. "They were the foundation upon which our entire civilization was built." The admission hung in the recycled air like a death sentence. For decades, alien species had congratulated themselves on their technological superiority while relying completely on human expertise to make their advanced societies function. War Prime. Vex Thalar received the emergency communication while standing in the ruins of what had been the Kethmori Empire's most productive mining system. New Montana was now completely uninhabitable, and his forces had been reduced to salvaging basic materials from the wreckage. All Kethmori expansion fleets are ordered to halt operations immediately, came the message from High Command. Critical system failures have disabled 60% of our fleet. Return to base worlds for emergency repairs. But there could be no repairs. The Kethmori had never learned to maintain the technology they had inherited and captured. There, engineers could operate human-built systems, but they could not fix them when they broke, and they certainly could not build new ones. Colonel Mike Torres received authorization from President Cooper to begin humanitarian evacuation operations. Despite everything the aliens had done, humanity would not stand by and watch millions of innocent civilians starve. Rules of engagement are strict, he briefed his teams. We provide emergency food, medical supplies, and transport to safe zones. We do not repair their infrastructure. We do not provide technical assistance, and we do not engage in political discussions. This is purely humanitarian. The first human ships to enter former alien space in 18 months were medical transports and food carriers, not warships. They arrived at failed colonies and dying space stations, offering help to the same species that had celebrated human departure. On the industrial world of Kepler-7, Captain Tyler Nash of the UHS Mercy found 12,000 crystalline Confederation civilians facing death from starvation. Their crystal-based biology required specific mineral nutrients that could only be processed by the now-failed atmospheric systems. This is Captain Nash of the Human Colonial Medical Service. He broadcast to the dying colony. We are prepared to evacuate your population to emergency refugee facilities. Do you accept humanitarian assistance? The response was immediate and desperate. Yes, please, we accept. Our people are dying. We need help. Nash ordered his ships to begin evacuation. Procedures. As human medics work to save alien civilians, many of the refugees ask the same question. Why are you helping us? We treated you so badly. The human medics had simple instructions. Because it's the right thing to do. Dr. Emma Bell, former human representative to the Galactic Council, received an unexpected communication from Nexus Prime. High Arbitrator Quinn Telex was requesting immediate diplomatic contact to discuss matters of mutual survival. Dr. Bell, the alien diplomat, began when the secure channel opened. I speak for a coalition of alien governments facing an unprecedented crisis. We believe we may have misunderstood humanity's role in galactic civilization. Emma listened politely, but without surprise. Human intelligence had predicted that the aliens would eventually figure out the truth, though it had taken longer than expected. We are prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for technical assistance, Quinn Telex continued. Full restoration of human council membership, expanded territory rights, reduced taxation, military cooperation agreements. I appreciate the offer, Emma replied carefully, but I'm not sure you understand the situation. Humanity has moved beyond the framework of galactic politics. We're no longer interested in council membership or territorial expansion. The silence on the communication channel stretched for nearly a minute. When Quinn Telex spoke again, her voice carried a note of desperation that had never been present before. Then what do humans want? What will it take to restore the systems that kept our civilizations functioning? Emma's response was gentle but final. Humans want to be left alone to develop our own society in our own space. As for restoring your systems, that may no longer be possible, even if we wanted to help. The truth was even more devastating than the aliens realized. During the 18 months since withdrawal, human technology had advanced far beyond what their former partners remembered. Chief Engineer Kelly Brooks had led development teams in creating completely new systems that made the old galactic infrastructure obsolete. The quantum processing arrays we've developed are 50 times more powerful than anything we left behind. she reported to President Cooper. Our new starship designs are faster, more efficient, and completely independent of the old navigation networks. Humanity had used their isolation to leap forward technologically, while the aliens struggled to operate systems that were now generations out of date. Fleet. Admiral Ryan Scott commanded the new human fleet from the UHS Defiance, a ship that represented the pinnacle of human engineering advancement. When alien scout ships detected human vessels near the border of former Council space, their sensor readings must have seemed impossible. "Sir," reported the Defiance's science officer, "we're being scanned by a Kethmori patrol ship. Their sensors can't get a proper reading on our hull composition or power systems." "Let them look," Admiral Scott replied. "It might help them understand that we're not the same species they remember." The Kethmori patrol ship sent an immediate report to their high command. "Unknown vessel of apparent human origin detected. Technology readings are beyond our ability to analyze. Recommend extreme caution in all future human contact." On the Hive Collective's remaining core worlds, the Supreme Node was facing the complete collapse of their vaunted group intelligence. Without human-maintained quantum processors, individual Hive members were losing connection to the collective consciousness for the first time in their species' history. "We are becoming separate," Node Alpha 7 reported in what might have been panic if the Hive were capable of such an individual emotion. "The collective is fragmenting into individual minds. This is unprecedented in our civilization's history." Some Hive members were discovering that individual consciousness was not the disaster they had expected. Free from the constant noise of the collective, they could think thoughts that had never occurred to the group mind. A few were even beginning to question whether the Hive's superiority over individual species like humans had ever been real. President Cooper received daily reports of alien civilizations requesting human assistance, offering everything from complete territorial concessions to technological partnerships to military alliances. The species that had once considered humans barely worthy of notice were now begging for help from the people they had insulted and dismissed. The Aquatic Depths Alliance is offering us complete control of their military fleet in exchange for repairing their deep-sea installations, reported Foreign Secretary Lisa Martinez. 2 years after the quiet withdrawal, Fleet Admiral Ryan Scott watched from the bridge of the UHS. Defiance is the most powerful military force in galactic history, assembled at the edge of human space. Not an invasion fleet, but a collection of desperate alien vessels carrying refugees and bearing white flags of surrender. 67 ships representing 14 different species, reported Captain Tyler Nash from the communications station. They're requesting permission to enter human territory for emergency negotiations. Admiral Scott studied the sensor readings with grim satisfaction. The alien vessels were a mixture of military ships, cargo haulers, and makeshift transports. Many showed signs of hasty repairs and jury-rigged systems. These were not the proud fleets that had once patrolled galactic space with arrogant confidence. "Are they armed?" he asked. "Weapons systems are powered down across the entire fleet," Nash replied. "Several ships appear to have physically removed their weapon arrays. They're making it very clear that this is not a military operation." The irony was perfect. The species that had once dismissed humans as violent primitives were now approaching human space defenseless and begging for help. President Jack Cooper received the request for negotiations in his office on New Washington, the capital world of the expanded human colonial union. The past 2 years had been remarkably productive for humanity. Freed from the burden of maintaining alien infrastructure and managing galactic politics, human civilization had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. "They want to meet on neutral ground," reported Foreign Secretary Lisa Martinez. The Ethereal Collective has offered their research station at Alpha Centauri as a meeting location. Cooper almost smiled. Alpha Centauri had been human territory for 300 years. There was nothing neutral about it, but the aliens were apparently too desperate to care about such details. "Who's leading their delegation?" he asked. High Arbitrator Quintelix of the Ethereal Collective, representing what they're calling the Alliance of Surviving Civilizations. Also present will be Counselor Vorthek of the Kethmori Remnants and Supreme Node Omega Prime, speaking for the Fragmented Hive Collective. The names told the story of galactic collapse. Vorthek, who had once led the Pure Galaxy Coalition in celebrating human departure, now represented the remnants of his empire. The Hive Collective had fragmented so completely that they needed a new designation for their leadership structure. Dr. Emma Bell prepared for the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. As the former council representative who had witnessed humanity's quiet departure, she would lead the human delegation in what promised to be a very different kind of negotiation. "What are our objectives?" she asked President Cooper during their final briefing. "Humanitarian assistance to prevent mass casualties," Cooper replied, "but no restoration of the old galactic order. Humanity has moved beyond that framework permanently." The meeting took place in the same conference room where human and alien diplomats had once worked together as equals. But the dynamics had changed completely. Now humans sat across from a collection of broken civilizations begging for salvation. High Arbitrator Quintelix began with the dignity she could still muster. "Dr. Bell, we come before you with the admission that our previous assessment of humanity was fundamentally flawed. We now understand that human civilization was not dependent on alien advancement, but rather the reverse was true. We appreciate the acknowledgement," Emma replied diplomatically, "though it comes rather late." Counselor Vorthek, the former leader of the Pure Galaxy Coalition, looked like a shadow of his former arrogant self. His once proud empire had been reduced to 7 functional worlds and a refugee fleet of 30 million displaced Kethmori. "The Kethmori Empire formally apologizes for our previous actions," he said in a voice that carried none of his old authority. "We were wrong about human capabilities, human intelligence, and human value to galactic civilization. We request immediate technical assistance to prevent the complete collapse of our remaining worlds." Supreme Node Omega Prime spoke for the Hive Collective with the halting speech patterns of a group mind that could no longer maintain full connection between its members. "The collective acknowledges error in previous assessments. Human computational assistance is required for survival of our species. We offer complete subordination to human authority in exchange for technological restoration." Emma listened too, each desperate plea with professional composure, but inside she felt a mixture of sadness and vindication. These were the same species that had laughed when humans walked away quietly. They had celebrated their victory over the primitive humans and looked forward to a galaxy free of human contamination. "I need to be very clear about humanity's position," Emma said when the aliens had finished their appeals. "We are willing to provide humanitarian assistance to prevent mass casualties. We will not allow entire species to face extinction if we can prevent it. However, we will not restore the old galactic infrastructure, and we will not resume our previous role as the maintenance crew for alien civilizations. But without human technical support, our civilizations will continue to decline," Quintelix protested. "The systems we depend on are beyond our ability to maintain or replace." "Then you'll need to develop new systems," Emma replied matter-of-factly, "or learn to live with simpler technology that you can actually understand and maintain yourselves." The silence that followed was deafening. The alien representatives were beginning to understand that humanity was not offering to fix their problems. They were offering to help aliens learn to fix their own problems, which was an entirely different proposition. Chief Engineer Kelly Brooks joined the meeting via holographic link from the Human Research Facility on New Geneva. Her task was to explained just how far human technology had advanced during their 2 years of isolation. The systems you remember from our previous cooperation are now 3 generations obsolete, she told the stunned alien delegation. Our current technology operates on principles that your species would need decades to understand, assuming you could understand them at all. She activated a display showing the specifications of the UHS Defiance, Admiral Scott's flagship. They, alien representatives, stared at readings that made no sense to them. Energy output levels that should have been impossible. Hull materials that their sensors couldn't identify. Propulsion systems that violated everything they thought they knew about faster-than-light travel. This is what human engineering looks like when we're not spending our time maintaining other people's outdated equipment, Kelly explained. We've had 2 years to focus on our own development instead of keeping your civilizations running. Counselor, Vorthik looked at the display with something approaching despair. How is such advancement possible in only 2 years? It's not advancement, Kelly corrected. It's what we always could have achieved if we hadn't been too busy fixing your problems to solve our own. The truth was even more humbling than the aliens realized. Humans had not suddenly become super intelligent or discovered miraculous new technologies. They had simply applied their existing knowledge and creativity to their own problems instead of alien problems. And the results had been spectacular. Colonel Mike Torres reported on the humanitarian operations the human forces had been conducting throughout former alien space. We've evacuated 17 million civilians from failed colonies and dying space stations. We've provided emergency food and medical supplies to 43 worlds. We've established refugee camps that can support basic life needs indefinitely. But we have not and will not repair the infrastructure that aliens abandoned or allowed to fail, he continued. Our mission is to preserve life, not to restore civilizations that never learned to sustain themselves. Supreme Node Omega Prime made one last desperate appeal. The Hive Collective offers complete technological and territorial concessions. All Hive worlds, all Hive knowledge, all Hive resources under permanent human control. We request only that you maintain our collective consciousness network. Emma's response was gentle but final. The Hive Collective needs to learn to exist as individuals or develop new ways of connecting that you can maintain yourselves. Humanity will not serve as life support for other species' social structures. President Cooper addressed the alien delegation via secure transmission from New Washington. His message was broadcast simultaneously to every surviving alien world as humanity's final statement on galactic politics. 2 years ago, representatives of your species declared humans unfit for civilized society, he began. You celebrated our departure and looked forward to a galaxy free of human influence. You got exactly what you wanted. The alien delegates listened in silence as Cooper continued. Humanity bears no ill will toward any of your species. We will continue to provide humanitarian assistance to prevent unnecessary suffering. We will trade with you on fair terms if you have anything to offer. We will respect your territorial boundaries and expect the same respect for ours. But we will never again integrate our civilization with yours. We will never again serve as the maintenance crew for your technology or the problem solvers for your social issues. You wanted independence from human.